So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Pagabo Building Blocks podcast. And today we're going to sort of talk a little bit about healthcare and the construction industry and how they maybe work together and maybe some of the opportunities that we can find for those. So, as usual, I'm joined by my guests, and today they are Stuart MacArthur, healthcare lead from Sir Robert McAlpine. We've got John Carson, who represents the client, actually. He's the head of capital development and planning at NTW Solutions. So he'll tell a little bit about what he does. And we've got a consultant. We've got Stephen Jenkins, who's a director at Turner Townsend. So we're going to kick it off. And firstly, as usual, I ask my guests just to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about them and their company. So I'll start with you, John.
Thank you, Gerard, and thank you for the invite for today. Hopefully I can add some words of wisdom of what we've done. But my name is John Carson. I'm Head of Capital Development and Planning for NTW Solutions. NTW Solutions is a subsidiary company of Cumbria Northumberland Tyne and Wear NHS Foundation Trust. We provide the operated healthcare estates. We have estates, facilities, we have car leasing, we have workforce, we have finance, we have procurement arms which support the trust in delivering healthcare. So the capital programme, it's always been, I think, even with Stuart, we've got a history with Stuart through the years. We've done quite iconic buildings and builds for mental health, and recently for the COVID solutions were involved in the Nightingale Hospital, the North East Nightingale Hospital, which was near the Nissan factory in Sunderland. And we also created a COVID ward overspill for Gateshead as well. We had that readiness as well. So yeah, I'll leave it there and I can add further details as we go on.
Brilliant. Okay, so welcome, John. I'll ask Stuart then now to pop in and tell us a little bit about himself and SRM.
Yeah, hello, Gerard, and hello to the fellow panelists. Thank you very much for inviting me to join the debate today. Yes, I've been in the construction sector for about 30 years. The last 20 of those have been specialising in healthcare, and quite a bit of that time has been spent delivering projects for John and his organisation. Yeah, I'm the health sector lead for Sir Robert McAlpine, which is a 150-year-old family-owned business which specialises in building and civil engineering. And we're well known for some of the nation's really iconic buildings, things like the Olympic Stadium and the Bloomberg headquarters and the Eden project. But we do a lot of work for public sector clients, particularly in healthcare and education. So at the moment, we're active on more than £1 billion of healthcare schemes in the UK, across acute, mental health and community settings for public and private sector clients, but predominantly for NHS clients. And we actively support a number of government-funded policy and innovation work streams, which are aimed really at improving processes, productivity, efficiency, and opportunities for standardisation in the health sector.
That's great. So thank you for that, Stuart. And then Stephen. We've got Stephen Jenkins, the director at Turner Townsend. So Stephen, tell us a little bit about yourself and TT.
Thanks, Gerard. Nice to see the panelists. Looking forward to talking through the topics today. I'm a director at T&T. Been working in the construction industry since the late 90s. I fancied being a doctor, but couldn't get through an episode of casualty, so decided to go into construction. And been delivering all sorts from £5,000 pipe reconfigurations right up to hundreds of £1 million worth of PFI hospital builds. So really enjoy this sector. As a business at T&T, we're not quite as old as Stuart. We're only 75 years this year, whereas SRM are 150. But we've been delivering health for a number of years now, and we work on all sorts of capital programs. We work public, private sector, working right up to the new hospital program at the moment. So we've got real good visibility of the sector and the challenges that we're facing at the moment.
That's great, Stephen. And as an aspiring doctor, you know, working on the health podcast is probably the right place for you.
That aspiration stopped at casualty, like I say.
Okay, good. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for the great little introduction. So let's start with, you know, probably quite an obvious sort of question, really. We've we've been living in COVID, and maybe we still are in many ways. But we're based on the sort of healthcare activities of your organisation. What really have you faced over the past sort of 12, 18 months, specifically as a result of the pandemic, and how have you dealt with that? So I'll probably start with John, actually, because as a client, it'd be quite interesting to hear your perspective.
Yeah, these are really good questions, Gerard, I have to say, and I'm trying to give a lot or talk a lot more how I felt than what we actually happened. But I think to start things off, the number one priority was obviously people's health and well-being, and that included my immediate team, the staff. I think the whole process extended to supply chains, because there was obviously some very critical people that you need to deliver capital projects or building work. So I think it was all about maintaining the health and well-being of people, and I think the mental health came in more so because of the well-being, because different people had different tolerance levels. Social lives was obviously reduced. There was a huge detrimental to mental health just because of the uncertainty of it all. So it was all about the people we had to deliver. There was the extended family as well. I think I noticed a lot for people who had school-age children. I think it was a lot more difficult for those people, and I had to make be a lot more flexibility around those people. My wife as well worked on the front line as a specialist community nurse, so all those things were on the back of your mind through the habit. So I would probably say, in relation to the healthcare facilities, obviously health and well-being was the first priority, and then I just think a lot of the stuff within the trust got dropped out to focus on the inpatient care and supporting those inpatient care. So a lot of the regular meetings were dropped, so we could just focus on that care. One thing we did introduce as a team, because as a team we always enjoyed the office and the creativity of the office and getting together in the office, and when we said what do we miss most, we missed working in the office, so we introduced a buddy system, which is really for new starters coming in, so you've got somebody to work with, to sort of mentoring thing. But we used to do it like the FA Cup draw or a football draw. We would draw various people, and you kept that buddy for a week or 2 weeks, and the only really sort of rules around it was you had to make a 5-minute call at least once a day and talk about anything but work, but obviously if work was on your mind. And I just think that created that togetherness where people were having the same thoughts, same considerations, but that seemed to help us through some difficult times. Yeah,
that's I mean, that buddy system, that's a great sort of tool, I guess. I mean, we were able to come into the office quite a lot during the time, and there's been a recent report about creativity, and I think creativity is certainly better when you're in sort of groups. But let's talk a little bit specifically about project delivery then. So we'll ask Stuart and Stephen on this. How were projects affected? How were they affected? And what did you do to try and counteract any of those issues? So Stuart first.
Yeah, well, initially it was hugely disruptive to the whole industry because, quite understandably, as John said, the initial focus had to be on the safety and well-being of all. And sites pretty much ground to a halt. But the industry reacted with real agility and flexibility and a lot of innovation to find ways to keep schemes going, to find ways to keep people as productive as can be. And within a relatively short space of time, I think most of the industry managed to get its sites reasonably productively operational again. The innovation really took place at the level of the minutiae of, specific methodologies for carrying out fairly mundane activities and tasks on a site in a way that allowed people to remain safe. But I think the other thing that affected us was, as an employer, was working out how to treat people fairly given the context of both site and project working and office working, because this pandemic affected different groups in different ways, as we've found out across society. And the ability to work flexibly and to work from home has been great for many office workers, but of course many people out in the field didn't even have that as an option. So the abiding memory that I will have of this pandemic is the way that the whole industry, clients, government, construction, designers, consultants, supply chain, really coalesced around the public health emergency of COVID in the form of the Nightingale hospitals, and what was achieved rapidly on a wide scale across many organisations was really actually quite significant, I think, in informing the government view about what the industry could be capable of. When you look at a kind of joined up project management, centralised approach to sharing lessons learned, sharing the innovation and daily problem solving that went on with those Nightingales, when you looked at things like the rapid emergence of shortages of key components, oxygen outlets was a particular issue at one point, and beds was another issue. The way that the whole industry coalesced and problem solved on the hoof was very, very impressive, and I think it gave a glimpse of what the future could be like for the major government investment in healthcare over the next decade, with a really well collaborative and a well integrated supply chain and industry.
That's I mean, some great comments there, Stuart, and I think I probably echo that, and I'm sure everybody would, about the way the industry did sort of circle around the problem and to try and help clients and supply side, and obviously the government sort of put the construction industry very much at the heart of the or the engine of any sort of pandemic recovery.
Yeah.
So that was good. So Stephen, so as a consultant, you say you're working slightly different to Stuart. You'll be looking at the different ways. So what what did you learn from it, and how did you deal with projects in that time?
I think the biggest thing I took from it, and I think it's something that we'll all probably benefit going from, that agility that Stuart talked about around site and evolving practices and procedures to make sure it was done in a safe and sensible way. It was echoed in the pre-construction phases as well, and I think clients particularly, we have to doff the cap to them, because they embraced ways of working which none of us were used to. I joked about having to mess about getting Zoom onto my laptop before we started. We were all doing that 18 months ago. None of us really knew what Teams was or Zoom or how to use it properly, and we had Skype for Business that you couldn't communicate with anybody on because it kept dropping out. We had all sorts of issues. But if we look at where we are now, 18 months down the track, we're in a completely different place, and we're all really, really competent at using these systems. And the way client groups that we work with have embraced that. And it's been difficult because there's nothing better than sitting in a room with a set of drawings and marking them up with the clinical users to decide what they do and don't want. We all like to do that, and I think we're all probably on this call that's where we'd much rather be. But it was a means to an end, and we needed to keep the projects moving. And we found ways of using PDFs, and architects had been marking it up with various pens and things so that they could see the evolution of the design was going on. So that buy-in from clients and the contracting teams that we work with, be that the consultants or the contractors themselves, all of them really working for the good of the project. And you don't often see that sort of collaboration. I think it'll carry on. I think a lot of us would like to try and get two or three half-hour slots back in the days rather than meetings like we do at the moment. So I think there's probably some middle ground that goes with that. I think one of the biggest things that we had from the delivery point of view, and again, this will be a benefit to schemes that we deliver in our sector, we were forced to look at how that pandemic impacted on the designs and costings that we had for schemes. So we'd be partway through schemes, and where we had business cases that we were preparing for submission, they'd be saying, well, how are you making this new hospital pandemic proof in the future? And how do your capital costs reflect that learning? The trust that you're working for, they won't need offices anymore now because they can all work from home. So there's all these new learnings that we're being asked to bring into the business cases that we're developing. And again, the agility of the teams to respond to that and give some really reasoned arguments as to why schemes should move forward in the forms that they are was really good. So I found it obviously the negative side of it was not good for any of us, but certainly the learnings that have come from it, I think will benefit us going forward as we deliver capital projects in the future.
That is a great sort of summary there, Stephen. And I think, as a consultant, you'll see a lot more of that because of the nature you're looking across a broad range of schemes. So you'd have seen how possibly different clients and different supply side were very much able to actually deal with it. Let's try and focus a little bit now on as we come out of the pandemic. That's really where we've got to try and sort of take the learnings that we've just sort of talked about. Now, procurement is obviously a bit of a hot topic. There's been some big investments. There's possibly some spending reviews kicking around towards it in autumn. We don't want austerity, obviously, for various reasons. So let's just talk a bit about the role of frameworks in this. We've got the construction playbook, which is really a user manual for our sector. But frameworks are now seen as a real good solution. And how from a client side, John, how do you see the use of frameworks? How do you get the best out of them? And will they really deliver that value for money for you? And how do you engage? And what should be done by the various parties?
Yeah, I think the simple answer to that, Gerard, is yes. Frameworks are probably the best route out and the best option to get best value. I think since I became a client from a contractor's role, the organisation always supported having frameworks or building something with long-term relationships. And Stuart was a part of this, as well as Turner and Townsend, not so much Stephen himself, but other people. But it does work. Obviously, you need that level of work for continuity. But if you've got a program of work, that continual improvement with long-term relationships, I don't think you can put a real value on it. It's essential. We are still using the same architects we did 12, 15 years ago, same M&E consultants, maybe same people, maybe not the same contractor. We've had a very long and successful relationship. We've had a very short one, and then we're at a very start of another very successful one with Sir Robert McAlpine. And there's lots of things for improved design. As I think Stuart mentioned before, it's just that collaboration of the supply chain can learn lessons, can bed things in. That's where the real value is. And as well with the repetitive design, because once we've designed a treatment room, say for instance, or a seclusion suite or anything, you've already done it. So it's repetitive and the knowledge is there. And if we move on to the next project and we say, right, this is what we're going to do, it's this type of bedroom and this type of things, the level of understanding is already established. Nobody's coming back and saying, oh, what are these rooms? Your starting point is quite high. So yeah, the continuing improvement with a long-term relationship, for me, I'm a big supporter. It's certainly successful. You have to maintain those relationships, and that's important. And the ability to have those honest, well thought out, robust discussions is only healthy, but you need a partner to do that. And also the two firms have got to align with values and things like that as well, because that's important. But yeah, I think I would say yes. Would be
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that I like the idea, your point that you made about muscle memory. The idea that because if you keep dipping in and out of procurements, you don't get that sort of, you don't get the supply chain, embedded into what you want as a client, do you, John?
No.
So, you're Stuart, from a contractor perspective, you're obviously on various frameworks. You're on our framework, you're on others, but frameworks definitely here to stay. And I think I would like to see them being leveraged more. Can you see that from the contractor's perspective?
Absolutely, and I think the key thing here, we all agree frameworks are a good thing, but it's all about context. And if you look at the context of the healthcare sector and clients like John and the projects that they have, as client organisations, it doesn't get much more complex than the NHS and the entities within it. It doesn't, multi-stakeholder environments that bring in clinical expertise, technical expertise. You've got really very rigorous, complex, iterative approvals processes in this sector. And if you look at the project themselves, they're often really technically challenging. They're often in proximity to, literally life-critical environments, logistically challenging, and many, many public interfaces inside the site boundary and outside the site boundary. So when you look at that level of complexity, what does it take to be successful in those kind of environments? You need the ability as a contracting organization to make a long-term commitment. And, you need to be able to build teams with the right behaviors. And if you're approaching these contracts on a one-off basis, it's very difficult to do that and have that longer-term view. So, we see with the benefit of frameworks, what they bring, the good frameworks, they have an overarching strategic platform, and they have some broader objectives and a longer-term time scale to allow you to build those behaviors and focus on values and outcomes. So, from that point of view, I think it's particularly pertinent in the healthcare sector, and frameworks are essential.
That's great. And it's quite interesting that you actually align specifically to health about the use of frameworks, because obviously, we are keen to promote frameworks into all areas of the public sector construction, but health really does lend itself to it, doesn't it, because of the nature of it. And we're going to see an awful lot of investment over the next 10 years. So Stephen, you talked, you're on frameworks, you're on our framework, you're on other frameworks. Do you have a similar sort of view, or can you, talk a little bit about sort of Stuart's view and your view and see how they work?
I think if I cast my mind back to when I first started procuring projects for the NHS, it was very traditional in how you did it. Usually had a JCT contract sat by it. And as a novice project manager, it was quite a baptism of fire. And I probably walked away with some scars from those experiences and good learnings as well. But as I moved through my career and working with some of the frameworks, I was fortunate, well, I have been fortunate on a number of occasions to work in framework environments with contractors that genuinely want to partner with a client. And when you can get that to its purest form, there is no better place to deliver a project. It makes it enjoyable for the client, it makes it enjoyable for the consultant team, and it makes it enjoyable for the contractor as well. And that's that utopian world that we all want to deliver projects in. So when I go into a client and they ask me how we should procure this, my starting point is always, we need to look to the frameworks and see which one suits our needs the best. I'll not pretend we don't come across some pushback from clients, particularly FDs, that think that there's a premium that you pay for that arrangement. And there probably is a premium that you pay for that arrangement, but over the life cycle of a project and then a program of works, that will more than cover itself. And that's the learning that we try and bring all clients on with us, because the benefits that underpin that relationship are almost unquantifiable, albeit if I asked Stuart, he'd be able to pull out a slide which captures all the great things that he's done on the various frameworks, and rightfully so, because it's great literature and collateral that we can share with all the clients that we work with in the future. So yeah, there is absolutely a future for frameworks, and that would always be our starting point, I think. Okay,
that's great. And I think obviously I echo what you've all said on that. I think there is a cost to doing it, but it's you have to make sure it's being delivered through the value of the overall project, and that's important. And it's great that organisations like both of you actually see that and help the clients understand it. So let's just, as we come towards the end of this sort of podcast, and let's just talk. There's a lot of talk about social value, there's a lot of talk about carbon, there's a lot of talk about sort of materials, etc., and innovation. I'm just sort of keen just to get people's just really quick sort of view on what are the sort of top 2 or 3 things we should be doing as an industry, possibly with a healthcare bent as well, in terms of, can you think of a technology or an innovation? Can you think of something around carbon and something around social value generally? So John, client, so technology, carbon, social value.
Yeah, on the spot again. my personal view on carbon is the zero carbon is, it'll probably dictate design outcomes. And I don't think it can be the only matrix, but it seems to be the only sort of defined outcome. And I think that could put us down routes. Yes, it's very important, global warming, reduce energy, but I think just to base it on your carbon output might give us some more problems going on. I think it's a much more wider, complex issue for the planet, as well as the construction industry and industries generally. The whole shift towards electricity is a strange one. Oh, I'm probably going to say we need an alternative fuel source onto that, but I think it's balanced design. I think with carbon, I think that's probably more a personal thing that I would like to see happen, rather than just to focus on zero carbon. I think there's lots of other things and industries that are part of this, part of the problem. Yeah, can't be just.
So I think what you're saying there, John, is what I think I probably agree with, which instead of focusing, yes, we have to have an objective for carbon reduction and look at that with social value, but let's re-engineer the way we do things to make those things disappear, rather than treat them as a problem in that sense. So try and re-engineer them out from the beginning. So Stuart, on those points, innovation, carbon, social value, how are you tackling it?
Well, I think these are strands that have been looked at in silos until very recently, but actually they are all utterly interrelated. And I think the key to unlock these going forward is digital and data. You look at MMC, and with the right digital construction techniques and toolkits that will enable the adoption of MMC and the parallel assessment of carbon impact in an iterative way. When you look at your social value objectives, lots of those are about engagement of SMEs and around local spend, and there are trade-offs to be done between the benefits of MMC, carbon, and the social local economic benefit that you get. But what we do see at the moment is the emergence of a little bit of consistency around some key tools that industry is starting to bring, that are starting to become the default tools that we're all capable of working with and using. And I think you can quickly see a point where the industry will stop looking at these areas as opportunities for competitive advantage and start looking at pooling and sharing our data to enable us to perform more productively and more efficiently and make much bigger scale achievements much more quickly. And we need to do that. The playbook will help that, because the values will underpin it, and the means of assessing what success looks like, it is different in the playbook. It's not looking at inputs, it's looking at value and outcomes. So that will really help accelerate that approach. So it's quite an exciting time, but a big challenge ahead to get to that sweet spot, I think.
I like your point about data. I mean, as a sector, we are not a data-driven sector, and I think that could unlock a lot of these opportunities. And I like your idea of moving away from silos for certain elements of what we should do as an industry. And I think carbon and elements around innovation could be part of that. So Stephen, your view on carbon. I mean, you see a wider range of projects because of the nature of what you do. Are you seeing things that you think are good? Are you seeing things that you were trying to change because they're not so good? And how do you think we should adapt?
I think just picking up on one of the points Stuart made around not looking at things in silo, and you touched on that as well, Gerard. It's really important that we do look at these as something that interacts with one another, because they're all really important elements. And we see that in the work we do, particularly in the health sector, around business cases that we need to submit, because all the things that we're talking about here, be that social value, be that carbon, be that MMC as an innovation, as one example, we have to really be able to demonstrate now when we submit these business cases that we've considered these. I think some of the biggest discussion points or topics that come up as we work through these, particularly around carbon, is when people trusts are spending hundreds of millions of pounds on their estate, I think there's a misconception that they're going to come away with a net zero site solution afterwards, but actually, trust we're working with could be spending 500 million on their estate, and it's actually only addressing 15% of their built asset. So there's a wider strategy that trusts are developing with the green plans and things like that as to how they're going to go on that journey to net zero. And it's a really difficult thing to map out and then understand the finances that sit behind it. I think with the MMC and the innovation part of that's going to be an interesting one for all of us. Again, I've worked in sectors where MMC is done properly. And by properly, I mean that is how they deliver their buildings, and they've got the supply chain that's mature enough to deal with that. I think with the hospitals that we do, we've talked about repeatable room standardization. We can get to a point, but with hospitals, that there is a uniqueness about most of them. So you're never going to get to that purest place. So it's what's the hybrid solution, and then what's the supply chain that sits behind that. And I'm getting cost plans now from contractors that have got an MMC premium in it. So you can see how the market is viewing that at the moment. So I think there's an evolution that needs to go on with that. And the social value part of things, that's really important for all of us. And Stuart will know with the bids that he's doing at the moment, be that for construction projects or frameworks to be on, clients and the frameworks that are procuring them, they've evolved, they've become more aware of social value. And they want to see the wider benefits of a £200 million hospital in society. I know on the agenda you sent, Gerard, you're asking about the kind of tools that we use. Is there any standardisation? The one that we're seeing more and more is a social value portal. I'm sure Stuart's used that. And they use themes to map out what are the benefits of the construction built asset in wider society. So there is definitely a development of clients and an awareness of clients to want to get the absolute maximum value from every pound that they spend on their built assets nowadays. So it's an exciting time.
No, that's right. I mean, obviously, we have a product which actually maps social value outputs in terms of that. There's probably 2 or 3 companies actually involved in this space at the moment, and I think it's quite an exciting time. So I agree with everything you said. So, right, I want to sort of thank everybody really for joining us today. We're at the end of it, probably a little bit over the time, but that's fine because Will's a great editor and he'll edit that lovely for all of us. I just want to say, I'm going to ask you one very final question in a second, but I just want to thank my guest today, Stuart McArthur from SRM, from McAlpine, John Carson from NTW, client, and Stephen Jenkins from Turner Townsend. So I want to thank you all for being here today. It's been a great sort of podcast. Look out for our next podcast, which will be coming soon. But finally, the last question for you all, and you need to answer it very, very quickly, please. Before the end of your career, on the day that you retire from this industry, what is the one thing you hope we've achieved? John.
To change the face of mental health, that will be my blue plaque, I think, from buildings that were just adopted, so to bespoke mental health and change the face of mental health infrastructure.
Mental health. Great, that's a great objective. Stuart?
To make the construction industry the most exciting place that young people want to be a part of.
All right. Okay. That's that's certainly one that I think I would echo. And Stephen, you're probably the youngest out the team here, so probably a longer objective. So, what is the one thing you want to see before you retire?
I think just echoing John's point. I think John's point there was an excellent one. I think if I could see us get anywhere, it would be that utopian world of project delivery that I described earlier in the podcast. Getting that contractor, client, and consultant team working in such harmony that it delivers value for everybody involved and the wider social community that's served by the projects that we deliver.
Brilliant. Okay, that's brilliant. So thank you. Mine is a life of careers rather than a career for life, and that echoes a bit of what Stuart said. So brilliant. So thank you all today, and have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.